Hello, how's everybody doing? Tyler here with your movie fix, and today we're going to be reviewing Doctor Strange. Now, this isn't going to just be my regular old movie review, because I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this film, in that I did think it was a really good film. I walked out of there really enjoying it, but at the same time, I feel like there was a bit of a misfire for me personally, and I was disappointed by quite a few things, but we'll get into that. Now, this is directed by Scott Derrickson, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Rachel McAdams, Tilda Swinton, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Mads Mikkelsen. That's really quite the cast, and some of them were utilized very well, and some of them weren't. Now, this movie introduces us to the mystical side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and on that regard, I think it fired off really well. Now, we're following Dr. Stephen Strange, who is a world-renowned neurosurgeon who gets in this really brutal car accident that they show in great detail on screen. That was a beautiful mess of a car accident that they weren't afraid to really show us some of that violence, but he loses, this is a surgeon, and he loses the fine motor function of his hands. You know, he can't keep his hands steady. How are you ever going to perform surgery again? And that's what happens to this guy. Now, Benedict Cumberbatch playing Doctor Strange actually really reminded me of Tony Stark. He reminded me a lot of Robert Downey Jr. He even kind of sounded like him at a couple of times, which really worked. He's this arrogant asshole. He's very pompous, very proud of himself. He could almost rival Tony Stark in the arrogance department, and something I was kind of worried about Benedict Cumberbatch was he is an English-speaking guy. He has an English accent. So I was a little afraid that we would lose some of his charm that he normally has on screen, and I feel like that does kind of help his on-screen presence. But we didn't lose any of that with him having his American accent, and I actually left this movie with Stephen Strange being my new overall favorite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe easily. And now that he's not able to practice surgery anymore, it kind of leads him into a self-destructive path. He's alienating the people that he loves. He's no longer able to do what he's doing. He's wasting away all of his money. And it's just really not a great time for Dr. Stephen Strange. And I felt like the first third of this movie really was the absolute strongest portion of it. It's really telling us who Stephen is. It was a great introduction to him. Such a fantastic character, and even supporting characters around him. It's really showing us his tragedy, what he went through, and how he's going to find his way back into being able to practice medicine again. And all of those great moments, all these so many great things that were happening in the first third of the film, I feel like they ultimately led us to what was the most mediocre part of the movie, which was just like a solid 2 minutes of just kind of a MacGuffin. So this is really what I felt was the weakest part of the movie, is how is he going to become Doctor Strange? What's going to lead him to the point where he goes and learns all these things to become the Sorcerer Supreme that we know of? So basically, he hears about a guy who was a patient who was paralyzed from an accident, and he goes into the mountains and he learns to use his spirit to control his body. And that's about how quickly he found out about it. He hears about it, he goes and finds the guy, and he asks him, "Oh, how are you walking?" "Well, I basically went up into these mountains, I went to this place, and they taught me to use my spirit to control my body." And it was about a 1.5-minute sequence of what could have been a really cool moment. Ultimately, I thought it was incredibly lazy that they went that route, that is how he managed to go to Nepal. I would have much rather seen them kind of show like a journey for Dr. Stephen Strange, kind of like trying to discover all these things going around the world with some soul searching, finding all these various ways, that things that didn't work for him with trying to use his hands again, and would have led him to Nepal. But instead, he just goes and finds this plot device guy who tells him exactly where to go, with this minute of exchange for a very insignificant character that we don't really see again. And then once we finally do make it to Nepal, this is where I feel that we kind of lose director Scott Derrickson's touch. Now we meet the Ancient One and Baron Mordo, who are really trying to open Stephen Strange's mind into the world of mysticism, showing him that this is a thing, this does exist out here, and that leads to a very comical and visually pleasing sequence. Just very, very impressive with what we saw on screen, with the very trippy visuals of him going into the astral plane, showing us these infinite parallel universes and him going through all this stuff. It was like a very modernized, improved version of that weird end sequence from 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was really great to see on screen with some amazing sound design as well. And really, that was just one of the many very visually impressive scenes going on there. And I was very surprised with how the Ancient One was. She was a very funny character, rather aloof, and they managed to keep a lot of mystery about Tilda Swinton's Ancient One, which I did enjoy. And now we get Mads Mikkelsen, who's playing our villain, who is a former student of the Ancient One, and he's stolen some forbidden magic, and he has some very ill intent for using it. And I feel like, although Mads Mikkelsen is an incredibly talented actor, I feel like he was just slightly wasted in that we didn't even get too much of a performance out of him, because he was really just kind of going around killing people. There wasn't even a whole lot of speaking for him to do, although he was kind of he was being puppeted by an even larger villain, which I'll get to in kind of my end rant. But because of this, he led to being just a rather one-dimensional villain, because you couldn't really buy into why he wanted to do what he was doing throughout the movie. And I felt like his reasons were just a little thin. But I feel like he was a very standard villain that did work for the movie. And speaking of, the fight sequences in this movie were really, really entertaining, and they were very unconventional, using some of the magical, like, martial arts that they were kind of doing, and using the weapons. Although, like I said, it was unconventional and unique, but it was a little hard to follow on screen, and I think that's more of a fault of how they shot it, like the cinematography of the fights. I just really couldn't tell what was going on during the fighting. Now, the actual, like, chasing scenes that we were going on, that we've seen in the trailers of the weird Inception-type city folding kaleidoscope stuff, that was all beautiful. That was really cool. You've never seen anything like that on screen. And I know I just kind of said it, but this was not Inception. This is not Marvel's Inception. It is not a ripoff of Inception in no way, shape, or form. Inception had, like, one or two little things of a building kind of mirroring itself, a city mirroring itself, and that was kind of it. This was an entirely different monster of special effects and what they were doing, and making it look good and making it feel like they were in a three-dimensional plane where physics didn't quite exist. So it was a very cool thing to see on screen, and no, it is not a copy of Inception. And also, just a side note is, I thought Rachel McAdams was actually a very well-utilized actress in this movie. I wasn't too sure, because I do really enjoy her. But she wasn't just a standard love interest in this film. She actually was a supporting role, and she helped Steven, and she actually did some really cool things in the movie and made for a lot of funny moments. And she's a character that you would hope to see again in this franchise of Doctor Strange or the Avengers or whatever. But I just thought she was actually well utilized, so I felt like mentioning that. And I did buy into the chemistry that Benedict had with people like Benedict Wong and Chiwetel Ejiofor. Their characters on screen, they all got along really well, and I bought into it, and they played well off of each other. And the relationships that Stephen Strange made with the librarian over where he was training, and Baron Mordo, who was like his mentor, training him through it, I thought that all worked out really good. But ultimately, leading into our climax for Doctor Strange, this was a really unconventional, very unique ending, what they were able to do. It's not your standard thing that you would see at the end of a blockbuster. Because of the nature of Doctor Strange and being able to bend, space and time, basically, it was really interesting to see on screen, although I felt like some of the weight went away with how serious that the ending wasn't taken. I guess the nature of the fight, again, and carefully I'm doing this fight, because there wasn't quite a fight at the end of the film with how you would expect a superhero movie to go. I still can't quite call this a superhero movie because of just the mystical nature of Doctor Strange. This was just a weird tale about, this was like sorcery and magic. So it was more of a like almost adventure, self-journey kind of film. And although it kind of reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy, which had an unconventional ending to the climax, I wouldn't quite put it on that level. But I got to applaud it at the very least for being unique, even if I did want it to be taken a little more seriously at times. Now, this was a very successful introduction into the magical side of, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and really to Dr. Stephen Strange, who I think was the biggest takeaway from this movie, as it should have been, because him as a character was so great, and you are going to walk away wanting to see more of him. This movie is fun, it's funny, with a bunch of great characters, and visually you're going to be very pleased. I don't see how you can possibly walk out of Doctor Strange without at least loving it. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to give Doctor Strange an 8.4 out of 10. However, moving into kind of my problems, my bigger problems with this film, like I said at the beginning, I loved it, but I was so disappointed in things, and based on my review, you'd probably think that I did really like it. And I think some of my problems really stem more from just Marvel Studios and what they tend to do with their movies. And just let me preface everything I'm about to say, that I enjoy every single Marvel Studios movie, to either I really like it to I really love it. I don't think I dislike any of them. But just for this movie specifically, because I'd put this in probably the top 3 Marvel movies for me. Although I think there are some that are better, just my level of enjoyment and my interest in who Doctor Strange is and all the astral projection stuff puts it high up there for me. I did really like this movie, but I think these problems kind of stem more from Marvel Studios as a whole. Now, like I said, that I mentioned that in the first third of this movie, I really felt Scott Derrickson's handprint. I felt like his DNA through the movie and his fundamentals that he used while shooting movies. And then as soon as we kind of hit the point where we really introduced the magic stuff, I feel like you couldn't tell that it was even Scott Derrickson doing it. Now, just looking at his filmography, now this is Scott Derrickson, movies that he has worked on, directed and written: Hellraiser, Inferno, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Sinister, and Deliver Us from Evil. This guy is a horror man. He is, now not a horror man. Great director, great writer. I like a whole bunch of those movies, specifically Sinister, Deliver Us from Evil, and Exorcism of Emily Rose. You cannot tell that a big-time horror director did this movie. You just can't. And that's what so many people were excited for. Like, oh, we're going to see all these cool, trippy horror visuals, these demons and spirits, and there was none of that. I could not feel Scott Derrickson doing this movie and handling the magic, and I feel like his personality wasn't there, especially when it came to the script. Because, and again, I mentioned that I wanted this movie to be taken more seriously than it was. Because, in the first trailer, we didn't really get too many hints as to what it would be, but it felt like it was a serious trailer dealing with maybe this is going to be the more darker, mystical movie. And this movie I would say this movie almost had more laughs in it than Guardians of the Galaxy. And I don't think it should have, because there were times where, man, there's a really great emotional moment coming, and then something goes and just kills the audience with laughter. And it works. The humor works. It's funny. I was laughing. I even got emotional in the movie. And you think that if the movie's fun, if you're having a great time and you're getting emotionally connected to the characters, what more can you ask for? I still just expected a movie like Doctor Strange to probably be treated more seriously. And I think I want to go back, and I think it could be something to do with the Marvel in-house script doctors. You have these people write movies. This was written by Scott Derrickson and two other guys who've worked on some other things. But basically all movies will go through script doctors where they can sprinkle in some things. And I think this goes down to Kevin Feige, because if you look at what Jon Favreau did with Iron Man and what Joss Whedon has done with the Avengers, I feel like they have tried to emulate that exact same tone and feel that Jon Favreau ultimately set, that we really got cemented in Joss Whedon's Avengers. And so every movie kind of has this sprinkle of comedy throughout it. And again, I love these movies, but I just wanted Doctor Strange to not have that. There were moments where I'm like, did they really have to kill the emotional moment there? And no, I don't think they need the levity to lift us up from that really depressing moment. That's not necessary. And I just feel like with Kevin Feige, he's that guy who, when playing Street Fighter or Injustice or whatever, he knows that one killer combo that works every single time. And it's a great combo. But like I said, it works every time. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most successful movie franchise ever. They are 14 movies in. Every single one of them is a hit. Your mileage may vary, and you may not think every single one of them is a hit, but all of them have made bank, and all of them have been received very well from audiences and critics. So Marvel Studios is a very well-oiled machine, almost to a fault. But and when I was sitting there in the audience, there was actually a guy behind me that said, he was talking to somebody, he's like, these Marvel films have almost become their own genre. And he's not totally wrong. I mean, every single one of these movies feels definitely like it is in the same universe. The only directors that I really felt like I can feel their thumbprint on that feels set apart from the rest of them are the Russo brothers. Like Winter Soldier and Civil War, I can really feel their personality in those two movies. And outside of that, I feel like for the most part, you kind of lose the director's personality, specifically with Scott Derrickson, because I wanted to see his sensibilities brought into this movie, and there were none of them present in this film. Like I said, there was a little too much humor, although it worked and I was laughing. I didn't want it all to be there. It was just so much more than I expected. So yeah, that's just how I felt about it. And quickly, before I see anybody absolutely praising Dormammu, although the ending was really funny, and again, it was unconventional and unique, and I loved it, just before I see anyone praise Dormammu, those same people that are going to say, like, oh, Dormammu was so cool to see on screen, so great, those same people are going to talk about Parallax and Green Lantern and Galactus and Fantastic Four, because that's what they did. They made him a big, cloud of dark energy. I guess that's cool. I know Dormammu's not supposed to look like that, and I think, maybe it's some other astral, like, projection type form of him. It's not really him that was there. But yeah, again, I'm not complaining about Parallax and Galactus, but I can't wait to see so many people praise Dormammu but kind of shit on those other guys when they kind of went that same route with this big guy puppeting the smaller villain, and then they show him and he's just kind of this big amorphous cloud of madness. So yeah, anyways guys, leave your thoughts down below. Have you seen Doctor Strange? What did you think about it? Do you share some of my sentiments about my downfalls of this film, the things that I was disappointed in? Again, I thought it was a pretty great movie, and I'll be the first person in line to get it on Blu-ray, but I wanted to get a little more out of it, with which perhaps we can see a little bit more of Scott Derrickson involved with Doctor Strange 2. I know they talked about doing, like, exploring the Nightmare realm, the Nightmare universe. That's something where you can really see Scott Derrickson shining. Anyway, leave your thoughts down below, guys. I'm really curious. For more videos like this, be sure to subscribe for more movie news, movie reviews, rants, top 10s, all the good stuff. I'll see you guys on the next video.